Welcome to this discussion about Capsim's Capstone Business Simulation and the textbook. So in this video, we'll talk about the simulation, how it relates to the textbook, and really give you a roadmap for using the book as information and moving through the simulation successfully. So let's dive right in. First of all, some fundamentals of Capstone. Capstone is Capsim's flagship competitive business simulation. So Capsim is the company. Capstone is one of multiple simulations that Capsim has developed and markets. Now the storyline in a nutshell is you had a monopoly, government splits it because of competitive concerns, and you have a number of companies, all of which start with one product in each of 5 segments. That's how the companies start, but then they can decide if they want new products or delete products or modify pricing, production, so forth, as they go through 8 rounds or 8 years of decisions. Each industry has 6 to 10 student or computer-run companies. That will depend on how it is set up in your class. You will have practice rounds plus up to 8, usually 8 full competitive rounds. Each round simulates a year of decisions. So you'll be making a set of decisions every year. That means you can't go back and change them every month in theory. You have to think about them a year in advance, 1 year for each round. The practice rounds are just as they sound. They're practice, a chance for you to learn the game, learn how it works. You don't typically not graded in practice rounds, except you have to participate and get your questions answered and be ready to start. You'll be making decisions in R&D, marketing, production, and finance. So all of the functional areas in business, or major functional areas in business, and they'll be made in that order. A little bit more about that later. You have lots of resources to help you. You have a team member guide that Capsim puts out, the Capstone Courier, which is available after each round, various debriefs, some that your professors might post. I post debriefs after all of the practice rounds, not during the competitive rounds. In those debriefs, I walk through the Courier and point students out to different situations that they are facing, but I don't do that during the competition because that would be giving perhaps inside information, and it's a competitive environment, so I don't want to do that when the game starts. There are different scoring options. Capstone has a balanced scorecard, or BSC, so it's not just about profits. They're typically in a class, BSC is not the entire grade, or however that works. It's not the entire grade. There's also teamwork and various strategy reports that can vary from one class to the next. There are also different options in Capstone, maybe restrictions about team size, who you work with, students working alone. There's a sustainability component that's possible, other modules, so different things that might apply, but the basics we'll talk about in this video are common to all approaches in Capstone. So what's my advice? Invest time early. There's a learning curve. Once you understand Capstone, it can be a lot of fun, but you have to learn it early and work as a team. Don't wait until the competition begins and think you'll figure it out during the game. If you do, you might find yourself run over by your competitors after a couple of rounds and then spend the rest of the game trying to catch up. If you need help, seek it immediately and have fun. And there is integration with the textbook. Every chapter has a Simulation 101 box. And I'm going to be talking about some of those concepts from each chapter in this video as we go. Again, you typically start the game before you complete the textbook. So the idea is to walk you through some of that material now so you can have the benefit of it before you actually cover that material in your class. So chapter 1, the overview in the textbook. So how does that relate to Capstone? Well, who uses competitive simulations? They're popular in a lot of strategy courses, other courses that you might take, undergraduate and graduate level. A lot of companies send their managers to classes where they do simulations. Simulations are great because you can lose tons of money without actually losing any money. And that's essentially the benefit. You can simulate that environment, and you have to allow yourself to get into it, understand the games, and learn from it. But they're super powerful because you can walk away with a lot of real life of learning, without the risk that's involved in running a business, and of course the time that would also be involved. Simulations do an exceptional job of teaching the integration of different parts of an organization. You'll see that in Capstone. You have to produce the products, you have to market them well, you have to set the correct price, you have to make sure you get the funds necessary to carry all that out. Everything has to work together, like piecing together putting together different pieces of a puzzle. It's if you don't do that well, you'll just won't succeed. So simulations do a really good job of that. They don't get into the specifics or some of the options you might have. For example, you might determine how much you should spend advertising a product, but you don't get to design, the advertisement, or say, I want to, use this type of billboard or that type of social media or what have you. You don't get that. So there are some limitations, some benefits, but there's a lot that you can do well. And simulations complement what you get from text material, and also even case studies and other kinds of things you might do in your class. There's a process to all this. There's a registration. You've got to register on time. If you think you can register late, don't think that. You'll have some problems, because the game starts, teams are assigned, companies are on the way, and you can't just pop in late. You have to take those registration deadlines very seriously. Complete your training. There's some simple training components which they don't teach you strategy as much as they teach you the mechanics of how to move around and make decisions. And then there are deadlines. When you have a round that runs at a certain day and certain time, they run at that day and time. If you're late, they can't just fit you in with a small penalty because the train already left the station. So think about it that way. If you come to the station 2 minutes after the train leaves, you're out of luck. You don't just run and catch the train. You've lost it. So make sure you take the deadline seriously and understand what they are going in. There are a lot of keys to success and failure. We're going to talk about a little bit of those as we go along, but know what they are: the preparation, knowing the rules, asking for help, those kinds of things. Keep that in mind as you go into that. Look at your own group as a top management team. You're responsible for your own company. If you go to a professor or you call Capsim and say, I need some help, should I do this or should I do that? Their answer is never going to be yes. You should raise your price, or no, you shouldn't reduce your production capacity. They're not going to tell you that, and they shouldn't, because you're the team. You're the top management team. You're the one who is responsible. You're the ones who run the company. You were hired by your shareholders to run the company. The professor is a consultant. Capsim is a consultant. And I say below this, beware of shortcuts. If you go online and do your search for how to win at Capsim, you'll find all sorts of interesting things, some interesting advice, some positive tips, a lot of wild recommendations. Those are just consulting. There's a lot of interesting stuff you'll find on social media and Reddit and everywhere else, but you take that for what it's worth. Sometimes it's worth what you pay for. Sometimes it's worth a lot less. Even free advice can destroy your company if you think there's a way just to make certain decisions and just win. As they say, win at the game. It doesn't work that way. But take ownership of your company and understand that the decisions you make are yours. Now, chapter 1 of the textbook talks about the efficient market hypothesis and subjective value. I'm not going to get into that in detail, but it's essentially this idea that, in the end, do all companies just sort of learn from each other and everyone performs the same, or can you have different companies chart different courses and perform differently? Now, there is some reality in both. I guess you will see that some companies learn from the successes of others during the game. But there's a lot of movement around, a lot of different approaches that companies take, and some find ways to market what seem to be the same products more successfully than others. So there's a lot of subjective value. You'll make that connection as you go through. Now, your process in dealing with Capstone is very simple. You create a strategy, you make decisions that support the strategy, and then you reassess after each round. And if you have a couple of practice rounds, you have a chance to see how this works, take those seriously, and then you'll be ready when everything resets for the competitive rounds. Now, chapter 2 in the textbook is about the industry. Now, this is defined at the beginning of the game. You'll have between 6 and 10 companies. Everyone starts at the same point because, again, the industry starts by the government dividing a monopoly into equal companies, each with a product in the same position, in the same segment. But there's a term that I use frequently called dispersion. That's the idea that as the game goes on, you'll see that companies move in different directions. Some become stronger or weaker than others. The products move around in different ways. They add products, they eliminate products. A lot of things change as the game goes on. You don't always see it in the first round or two, but you see it as things move on. There is defined industry growth, and sometimes it's accurate, sometimes not exactly, depending on how the game works out. But you see growth forecasts, and that helps you forecast demand. This is probably the most important thing you'll do to be successful in the game, and one of the things that you have to do well, and it's very difficult to do it really well because you're trying to figure out how much you're going to sell based on what everyone else is going to do, and they're trying to do the same thing, and you have to figure out what their strategies are and guess, how they're going to price and advertise and all of that. But there are formulas to help you do that. The data is available. You do the best you can, and you learn from it, and you get better at it. The Capstone Courier is really useful. It does provide that data and a ton more data than you probably need. All these are publicly traded companies, so you get competitive data and lots of different graphs and so forth. A lot of good industry information to help you make decisions. Now, chapters 3 and 4 in the text are about the external environment, looking outside, the political, legal, economic, social, and technological forces, or the pest. Now, all of these are active in Capstone. You can think about the Capstone rules as the regulations, the regulatory environment. Different rules of how you compete, what you can do, what you can't do. There are economic rules too, economic issues, projected growth rates, interest rates, prevailing rates, and how your company might be a little bit higher than the prevailing rate or have a better rate than your competitors, depending on how well your company is managed. There's social forces, as we often say with Capstone. You give customers what they want or else. And it's defined pretty clearly. Every product has a combination of factors that customers consider in various order, and one of those factors is the combination of your price and your size, and you got to make sure that fits within the realm of the segment. So yes, you have to understand what customers want and how you line up your products accordingly. There's also technology. There are different technology considerations depending on some of the modules. There's a TQM consideration too that comes into the game as well. Chapter 5 looks at the internal environment or ethics in CSR and some other factors in there. There's some personal ethics here as well. Team management. What do you do if a member of your team just freeloads and doesn't do anything? I know it's very common to say, well, I don't want to disrupt the team, or I don't want to rat on him, or what have you. No, if you have somebody on your team who's not pulling his weight, you need to contact your professor and address it. It's your responsibility. It's not right for your team. Your team is going to suffer if you don't do that. So, of course, go to the person first. Try to work it out as best you can. But if you can't do that, seek help and try to get your team squared away early. You can't collude with other teams. You can't sit down and say, I'll tell you what, if you price here, I'll price there. If you raise this, I'll lower that. That's not permitted. End of game tricks. Your professor will look for those. If you try to do something like cut all of your advertising to improve, the last round to improve your cash flow, well, your professor will see you've done that, and you've essentially set your company up to do really poorly if there were an additional round. So those are ethical considerations. Also social concerns. There's a sustainability option that your game might employ. And you have other things like customer satisfaction, which is a big part of the demand for your products and ultimately your ability to sell products. And then employee satisfaction, some other issues that come into play, some employee training issues, all sorts of investments that you can make in there as well. Remember, the balanced scorecard is more than profit. It's and stock price. It covers a lot of things that are not traditional financial concerns, and they fall in this category of social concerns as well. Chapter 6 is the first of 3 chapters about strategy. It's the corporate strategy. It looks at the firm level or the broad considerations of growth, stability, and retrenchment. And as you get into that, you'll read a lot about whether your company needs to get larger, try to maintain the same size, or maybe even get smaller. And of course, growth is common early on in Capstone. Everyone wants to get bigger. The industry is going to grow, but you do have to consider if it's worth the cost. I mean, if you need to maintain reasonable margins, or you can find yourself expanding market share and losing money. So you want to consider that. And stability is sometimes pursued in the mid to late rounds. It can actually be more profitable at times. And sometimes if you're a middle of the pack company and you feel like it's just too costly to grow, you might try to hold on to particular markets you have. And then some companies, if you're really struggling, might resort to retrenchments. Undesirable. Hopefully you're not there, but you might have to decide to just hold on to a smaller piece of the market and try and maximize what you have. And again, the key is to try to avoid that position, but sometimes it happens. A couple of notes here. Mergers and acquisitions are not permitted. You can't buy your competitors. You can't merge with them. It's not part of the game. And your stock price can't go below $1. That's pretty low, but the point here is that your company will stay in the game until it's over. Even if you're not doing well, there's no way that you're automatically kicked out of the industry. So chapters 7 and 8 are the second and third chapters about strategy. They're about business and functional strategy. So you have a lot of competitive positioning in Capstone. In fact, one of the first things you do is you select one of the 6 strategies from the team member guide. And this is similar to what you see in Porter's typology in the text. It's not exactly, there are some different options, a life cycle option, moving products through, but they're based in that same logic of cost and differentiation. But you select one of those strategies, and there are possibly some others beyond the 6, but that's something your professor may or may not discuss. But the 6 are good ones to think about. And then study the Capstone Courier after each round to track your competition. Understand what your competition is doing and which ones are pursuing which strategy. And hopefully none of them are pursuing what you're doing. That may not be the case, but if you're pursuing a crowded strategy, it may be difficult to sell products and be successful. Now, in terms of the chapter 8, the functional strategies, integrating them in R&D, marketing, production, and finance is really important. It's so important to make sure that if you're pursuing, let's say, cost leadership, that you think about what that means in terms of how much, how you price your products, how much you invest in building economies of scale, whether it's important to be involved in all segments, how much you produce, what type of financing you pursue. There are ramifications for each strategy in the various functional strategies, functional areas. Your textbook talks about these, but these are important in the game to implement a consistent strategy. And don't be a reactor or get stuck in the middle. I'll put these in quotes. As you read chapter 7, you'll learn more about what they are. Reactor is one of Miles and Snow's 4 strategies, and the reactor simply reacts. The reactor is the guy that in Capstone, at the end of every round, is just looking and seeing what happens and says, well, gee, maybe we should just raise this price, or produce more of this over here, or issue more stock, and just next round it's another wild set of recommendations. Don't be that reactor. Have a strategy, follow the strategy. Reactors can't perform that well. They're lucky just to stay somewhere near the middle of the pack. Stuck in the middle is the term that Porter gives to the company that tries to execute both differentiation and low cost. Now, spoiler alert before you read the book, it is possible to pursue both, but not simple. There are some trade-offs. Understand those trade-offs and don't find yourself trying to do too much, or you can end up doing nothing well. Chapter 9 is about strategy formulation. Well, in Capstone, you should spend some time thinking about the capabilities you want to build. Do you want to be known for quality? How do you build that? What decisions do you make? How can you become the high quality producer if that's the capability you want to emphasize? What if you want to build a capability where you are the best known or known to have the best products and meet the customer demands in a particular segment? Or what if you want to build economies of scale? What kinds of capabilities do you want to build? Again, be realistic when you view your company versus rivals. Don't think that you can do everything, and if you just make these changes, you'll be better than everybody else because they're doing the same thing and they're going to be improving as well. So it's not always so simple. Build synergy. Understand how decisions you make can help you in lots of ways. There may be ways that you allocate certain marketing expenses, like there are in Capstone, that can cross over into multiple products. So there's some synergy things you can do, but there are also trade-offs. You just can't cut your price and grow your margins at the same time. It doesn't work that way. Understand some of the trade-offs that you have to deal with, and understand the opportunities and threats from your competition, especially. Who's doing what, and you can, for example, you can see if a company has a new product coming out. You can't see exactly what it's going to be until it's priced and in the market, but you get that one round or 1 year head start, if you will, of seeing that the product is there. So that's a potential threat for you. So understand how you think about the opportunities and threats in your environment. Chapters 10 and 11 in the text are about strategy execution, and here it's first thing is go back to the basics. It's teamwork, having an organized team, organized meetings, knowing your people, getting to know each other, allocating enough time. If you just want to get together 30 minutes and make these decisions, you might find that you can't make them in 30. As a general rule, you get more efficient as the game goes on, but early on, make sure you allocate enough time to make good quality decisions, whatever that means. Meet your deadlines. Don't find yourself in a position where you have to put forward anything short of your best work, because how you do in the first round can have a drag effect or a benefit down the road. And I like to say work and play hard in this. Capstone can be a lot of fun, but you have to put the effort in, so do that. Think about your decisions from left to right in strategy execution. What I mean by that is when you look at your decision screen, you'll see they move from left, from the R&D, all the way to the right through the finance. So going in that order, try to make them in that order. Improve your forecasting acumen each round. Forecasting is the key. You've got to forecast. Spoiler alert here: Capstone will give you a number when you go online and you run your pro formas. They'll give you a number of projected demand. That is in many ways a quasi-random number. That's not your given forecast number. You have to compute it yourself. The number's there to run pro formas, but if you don't replace it, you'll be using bad data. You need to get better each round at forecasting. What that means is producing enough, ideally, to meet the demand in your segments without producing way too much where you have massive inventory costs. You got to balance that out. And if you have stockouts, you'll suffer from that. Run lots of pro formas. So as you make rounds or change your decisions, you'll see that everything gets updated online. You get to run your pro formas, see how it affects your results. Keep doing that. Pro formas are great tools, but recognize your limitations. Pro formas work on the assumptions that you put in. So if you assume you're going to sell a certain number of products, the pro formas will be computed on that basis. If you don't make it, you don't make it. So don't just say, hey, the pro formas were great, and you ended up losing money. What happened? Well, what happened is your assumptions just didn't work out. So great tools, but understand the limitations. Consult the team member guide frequently. It's well written. It contains a lot of great data on the rules of the road and what you need to know. And seek advice from consultants. By consultants, I mean if you contact Capsim or you contact your professor, maybe a teaching assistant, whoever might be there, seek that advice. And again, they're consultants. They don't tell you what to do, but they can help you understand your decisions. And then finally, there's that strategic change dilemma. And this gets a lot of attention in the textbook, sort of the pros and cons of changing strategy. It's good to remain flexible, but there's also something to be said for the long-term benefits of consistency. So if you have a strategy at the beginning of the game, you don't want to just wing it and change it every round. That's basically being that reactor we talked about. But On the other hand, there might be a situation where you have to make a strategic change. So you think through that, and if you have to, you make it. And there's likely to be some type of strategy report at the end, and you want to track your decisions and your strategy changes along the way so you can report on that at the end of the game and explain what you did and why and what you learned. Finally, chapter 12 is about strategic control. Now, here's some advice for you. Study the courier, the Capstone courier, and debrief your successes and challenges before proceeding to the next round's decisions. So if you have a debrief that's provided by your professor, that's great. I provide debriefs for the practice rounds. If you don't, debrief it among yourselves. Don't just look at the quick results and jump in and start making decisions. Understand why things happened and how you got where you got. If you're performing well or not performing well in one segment or another, understand what's going on before you start moving to decisions. If you jump to decisions, it's like painting the walls of your house before you build the foundation. It's likely to create problems. Pay attention to details here. There may be opportunities in the game to adjust some things. Accounts payable, receivable kinds of things might be in there. Maybe tweaks to advertising, commissions, or all sorts of things. I'm deliberately being evasive here because I don't want to tell you exactly what I think you should do, but there are some things in there that are detail oriented that you can adjust and can potentially be beneficial to your company. Prepare for crises. Now, part of chapter 12 is about crisis management. I will say there are some crises in Capstone, and not all of them, but most of them are management error. Okay, one example might be the team doesn't meet or confuses when a deadline occurs, or maybe somebody, for whatever reason, enters the wrong decision and just completely, puts drop a product, eliminate a product from sale instead of raising the price or doing something else because someone didn't understand the process. Those are things that can happen in the practice round and no problem if they do. But when you get in the competitive round, you want to avoid those. But you want to prepare for those. You want to avoid the management error as much as possible. But if you have a crisis, responding and recovering from a disappointing round is important. You may have completely blown the forecast for demand, or you may not have realized what your competition was doing, or for whatever reason, things might feel like things are imploding in your company. And there's some different principles that you can follow: seeking help, seeking advice, learning from from the material you have, but also remaining calm. There may be some things you have to address as your team, but avoid the scapegoating, the blaming, that your teammate was the big problem, not you, what have you. Try to avoid those kinds of things and emerge as a stronger team if you have to face a crisis. Now, a few closing thoughts as we move forward. Again, it's a great, memorable, and fun learning experience if you prepare and work hard. If you don't, it's not. Okay, if you just try to figure it out as you go, you will lose money and you will struggle and you will not have a good experience. So it's either great, memorable, and fun, or it's not any of the three typically. So put the time and energy in and understand the rules of the game early on, and any specific requirements your professor has about scoring, grades, and particular modules that might be added, or how teams work, and strategy reports at the end or presentations. Any of that, make sure you understand that early on. Don't expect accommodations for being late or any kind of mid-game changes. You can't just say, hey, I don't like my team, put me somewhere else. Those are really difficult to do in a simulation. And you can't just create teams once the game starts, because you have a certain number of teams and there they are. So you really have to jump on this early on and don't expect accommodations during the game. Any issues need to be addressed very early. Don't divide and conquer. This is such a temptation when you have team work. It's a bad habit. It doesn't work well in many classes, especially does not work here. If you think you're going to have 3 or 4 people on a team and one will handle R&D, one will do finance, one will do marketing, they'll all just upload their decisions, you will have a disaster. It's okay to have some specialization, people from different majors, expertise, that's great. And they can bring their contributions to the game, but All the decisions need to be ultimately made at the end together. Everyone's got to come together. They have to flow, come together as a package. If you don't have that teamwork, you will struggle. And leverage your available information and resources. The team member guide is really well written. The courier provides more data than you'll ever want. It's a lot of good stuff in there. The debriefs that are provided by your professors, the debriefs in the game available, your professor, teaching assistants, Capsim support, that's all available. Leverage those resources. Don't just feel like if you don't know what's going on that you're out there by yourself. You have some options, and you have more options early in the game, so you want to be more aggressive early on if you don't know what's going on. So with that, I will say good luck, and I hope you enjoy Capstone, and I hope you see a lot of connections between Capstone and the text as you go through both of them.